In the secluded valley of Redgrove, a quaint town lay nestled against the dark silhouette of the Wailing Woods. The town was picturesque, often bathed in the soft glow of sunset, but once every century, it fell under the shadow of the blood moon, a rare celestial event that cast the moon in a haunting crimson hue. This event was not just a spectacle for the townsfolk but a harbinger of a curse that had plagued Redgrove since its founding. The curse was as old as the town itself, beginning with an ancient feud between the town's founder, Elijah Redgrove, and a mysterious coven of witches who lived deep within the Wailing Woods. The witches had warned Elijah that his settlement on their land would bring dire consequences. In defiance, Elijah banished the witches deeper into the forest, where under the blood-red moon, they cast a curse ensuring that every century, when the moon turned crimson, calamity would befall the town. As the centennial of the latest blood moon approached, strange occurrences started to grip Redgrove. Animals were found wandering from the forest, their eyes glowing an eerie red. Whispered voices echoed through the woods at night, and the townspeople grew anxious, their dread building with the waxing moon. Sophie, a young historian and descendant of Elijah Redgrove, was determined to break the century-old curse. Her research led her to the long-lost diaries of Elijah, hidden within the town's archives. The diaries spoke of a hidden artifact, an amulet the witches had cherished, which Elijah had seized and concealed somewhere within Redgrove. Convinced that returning the amulet might appease the witches and lift the curse, Sophie enlisted the help of her friend, Lucas, a local woodsman who knew the Wailing Woods better than anyone. Together, they scoured the diaries for clues, leading them to an old, abandoned chapel on the outskirts of the forest. There, beneath the floorboards, they discovered the amulet, pulsing with a faint, crimson light. The night of the blood moon arrived, the sky darkened to a deep scarlet, casting an ominous glow over Redgrove. Sophie and Lucas ventured into the heart of the Wailing Woods, the amulet leading them to an ancient clearing. There, the remnants of the witches' coven, spectral figures cloaked in shadows, awaited. Sophie stepped forward, offering the amulet to the apparitions. The air grew tense, the ground trembling beneath their feet as the spectral witches converged around the artifact. A silence fell over the woods, broken only by the whisper of the wind. Suddenly, the witches' leader, a wraith-like figure with piercing red eyes, addressed Sophie. "The curse was not ours alone to bear," she revealed, her voice echoing with an ancient sorrow. "It was a pact sealed with your ancestor. The land demands a guardian, and with each blood moon, one must be chosen." Sophie, realizing the curse's true nature, felt a chill of dread. The witches explained that the guardian spirit would protect the town, but at the cost of their presence in the physical world until the next blood moon. With the revelation, Lucas stepped forward, offering himself as the guardian to preserve the town and spare Sophie. As Lucas approached the witches, the amulet glowed brighter, and he was enveloped in a radiant crimson light. Sophie watched, heartbroken yet filled with gratitude, as her friend transformed into a spectral entity, his figure becoming one with the forest. The blood moon's curse was appeased, the calamities ceased, and Redgrove was safe once more. Sophie returned to the town, where she dedicated herself to documenting the true nature of the curse and preparing the next generation for the choices they would face under the crimson moon. Years later, as the next blood moon approached, Sophie looked towards the Wailing Woods, where she could see a faint red glow. She smiled, knowing Lucas was watching over them, waiting for the night he could return, even if just for a moment. In the rugged coastal town of Harrogate, buffeted by ceaseless winds and gray, surging seas, stood the old Whitmore Lighthouse. A beacon for weary sailors, it had guided countless vessels safely through treacherous waters. Yet, as any local could attest, the lighthouse bore its own ghostly tales, chief among them, the legend of the spectral sailor. The spectral sailor was once a lighthouse keeper named Thomas Mallory, who had manned the Whitmore Lighthouse some 50 years ago. Known for his solitary nature and a deep fondness for the sea, Mallory's life ended tragically one stormy night when a ship he was signaling to crashed against the rocks. Overwhelmed by guilt, believing he had failed in his duty, Mallory's spirit never left the lighthouse. It was said that on nights mirroring the storm of his demise, his ghost would appear, warning of imminent danger. Enter James Corbett, a skeptical, modern-day lighthouse keeper, who found such tales fanciful. An engineer by training, James trusted technology over folklore. He lived alone in the lighthouse, content with his devices and monitors that ensured no human error marred his watch point. One evening, as a storm brewed fierce and wild, James detected a small fishing boat, the Sea Sprite, straying dangerously close to the perilous rocks. He radioed the warning, adjusting the lighthouse beam to guide them away. But amidst the howling wind and crashing waves, his voice crackled and drowned out by the storm. As midnight approached, with the storm at its peak, James noticed a flicker in the corner of the lighthouse gallery. There, to his disbelief, stood the apparition of Thomas Mallory, the spectral sailor. Clad in an old seafarer's coat, his face pale and eyes burning with a grim intensity, Mallory pointed urgently towards the sea. James, though frightened, rushed to his telescopes and saw, to his horror, that the Sea Sprite had not changed course. In that instant, his modern devices faltered, screens blanked and radios silenced by the storm's fury. With no other choice, he trusted the phantom before him. Grabbing an old, manual foghorn, James sounded the alarm in the way keepers of old would have. He watched as the boat, catching the signal, corrected its course just shy of the rocks. Breathing a sigh of relief, he turned to thank the apparition, but Mallory had vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared. The next day, under clear skies, the crew of the Sea Sprite visited the lighthouse. They spoke of hearing the foghorn over the radio's failed signals, a haunting sound that had guided them to safety. Intrigued and humbled, James decided to delve deeper into the history of his spectral predecessor. He discovered old logs and diaries in the lighthouse's attic, chronicling Mallory's life and the fateful night of his death. The more James read, the more he understood the weight of responsibility Mallory felt, and his subsequent despair. It dawned on James that Mallory's spirit lingered not out of guilt, but as a guardian over those who faced the sea's merciless whim. From that night forward, James embraced the role of both engineer and keeper of the old ways. He maintained the lighthouse's modern instruments but also respected the traditional signals that once were the sole guidance for ships. Years later, when James finally retired, he left behind two sets of instructions for the next keeper, one for the machines and one for the ghost. For in Harrogate, technology could fail, but the spectral sailor's warning was eternal, his presence a reminder that some things beyond the realm of the living are not just tales to be told but lessons to be heeded. In the quaint town of Eldridge, tucked away from the modern hustle, stood an ancient carousel. It was said to have been crafted over a century ago, bearing ornate horses with eerie, lifelike eyes and gilded manes that shimmered under the moonlight. Known as the Phantom Carousel, it sat unused in the derelict amusement park at the town's edge, a place shrouded in local myths and dark rumors. Local legend had it that every night, when the clock struck midnight, the carousel would creak and groan to life, spinning with a ghostly vigor, absent of human touch. The townsfolk whispered of its curse, and how, on nights of the full moon, one could hear the faint echoes of ghostly laughter and spectral music that danced through the air like whispers of a forgotten era. Enter Julia, a young and spirited journalist drawn to the arcane and mysterious. Her curiosity piqued by the stories, she ventured into the old park one foggy evening, her camera and notepad ready to uncover the truth of the Phantom Carousel. As the moon crested above, silver light bathing the eerie playground, Julia noticed the air grow inexplicably colder. Midnight was approaching. With bated breath, she watched as the carousel began to stir. First, a slow creak, then a gradual spin, the figures blurring into specters as the organ sprang to life, playing a haunting melody that seemed to seep out from the bowels of the earth itself. Julia approached, mesmerized by the spectacle. The horses, their eyes aglow with an unnatural fire, seemed to beckon. She reached out, touching the cold, lacquered neck of the nearest horse. The moment her skin made contact, the music crescendoed, and she was suddenly gripped by a myriad of emotions, sorrow, joy, terror, all at once overwhelming her senses. Drawn by an inexplicable force, Julia climbed onto the horse, feeling its cold hardness beneath her. The carousel spun faster, the world blurring into streaks of colors as the spectral laughter grew louder, almost deafening. Julia wanted to scream, to jump off, but she was held in place, as if the horse itself commanded her to stay. The night wore on, and as the first light of dawn approached, the carousel began to slow. The music dwindled into a melancholy tune, and the laughter faded into the morning mist. Julia, disoriented and chilled to the bone, stumbled off the carousel, her mind swirling with nightmares made real. Days passed, and Julia's experience turned into an obsession. She visited the carousel nightly, documenting each spectral occurrence, each ghostly ride. With each visit, she noticed more of the carousel's secrets revealing themselves, the names of previous riders etched into the poles, dates marking their rides, some over a century old. Determined to understand the carousel's curse, Julia delved into the town archives and uncovered a chilling revelation. The carousel had been built by a grief-stricken toymaker who lost his wife and children in a tragic accident. He crafted the carousel in their memory, infusing it with a spell intended to bring them back for one last ride together. Instead, it trapped their spirits, and those of any who dared ride after midnight. On the night of the next full moon, armed with her knowledge, Julia approached the carousel with a plan to break the cycle. She rode again, whispering an ancient incantation she had found, hoping to free the trapped spirits. As she spoke the last word, the carousel burst into spectral flames, the ghostly figures materializing, nodding in gratitude before vanishing into the ether. The next morning, the carousel was gone, reduced to ashes. Julia's story, published in a major occult magazine, turned her overnight into a revered figure in supernatural circles. But on some nights, when the moon is just right, children in Eldridge swear they hear faint carousel music on the wind, and they dream of ghostly horses inviting them for a midnight ride, a reminder that some phantoms never truly leave. In a quaint college town, nestled among leaf-strewn streets and ivy-covered walls, an old Victorian house stands slightly askew, its shingles weathered and paint peeling. 5 students, eager to start their semester, move in, drawn by the low rent and the house's proximity to campus. They laugh off the landlord's brief mention of the house's peculiar quirks. Almost immediately, odd incidents begin. Books rearrange themselves on shelves, lights flicker, and whispers echo in empty rooms. At first, the students tease each other about these anomalies, blaming the invisible roommate. But the jesting stops when their personal items start appearing in impossible places, like sealed drawers or high ceiling beams. One night, while trying to catch the prankster among them, they set up cameras. The footage reveals nothing but the items moving on their own. Chills run down their spines as they realize something unseen shares their home. As weeks pass, the disturbances grow more intense. The entity seems playful at first, hiding things, turning on music, and sometimes gently tugging at their clothes. But then, it turns malevolent. Doors slam shut, trapping them in rooms. Cold drafts follow them, and an oppressive, unshakable feeling of being watched settles over everyone. Desperate for answers, the students dig into the house's history and discover it was once owned by a reclusive professor rumored to have dabbled in the occult. His research was on thin places, spots where the veil between realities is paper thin, supposedly allowing entities from other dimensions to cross over. His last entry chillingly notes a successful experiment just before his mysterious disappearance. Frightened but fascinated, they find the professor's hidden lab in the basement behind a bricked-up wall. Inside, amid dusty tomes and strange diagrams, lies a journal describing an invisible creature he summoned but could not banish. It thrived on human interaction, growing stronger and more corporeal with attention. Realizing their engagement with the entity has only empowered it, the students decide to ignore it, hoping it will weaken and leave. For a few days, the strategy seems to work, the disturbances lessen, and their lives begin returning to normal. One night, while everyone is asleep, the oldest student, Mia, hears laughter in the hallway. Drawn by curiosity, she finds a trail of her belongings leading to the basement. The door, usually locked, creaks open invitingly. Inside, she sees flickering shadows and hears whispers but sees no one. The laughter grows louder, bouncing off the walls, disorienting her. Mia suddenly understands, the entity doesn't need to be seen, it needs to be believed in. As this realization dawns, the door slams shut behind her. The laughter stops. Silence envelopes the room, thick and suffocating. Mia's heart pounds as she feels something brush past her. Back upstairs, her roommates wake up to a quiet house. They call out for Mia, but there's no answer. Her room is empty, her bed untouched. They search the house, increasingly frantic. Finally, in the basement, they find Mia's belongings arranged in a circle, but she is nowhere to be found. The house grows calm as if finally sated. The remaining students, terrified and unable to comprehend Mia's disappearance, move out the next day. The house stands empty once more, waiting quietly for new occupants to breathe life into its walls and stir the curiosity of the invisible roommate once again.